This report brought to you by Houndstooth, Houndstooth KC in the River Market, 507 Walnut. Trent, I got to start with the news of the day, right? John Dorsey out in Kansas City, and then Andy Reid gets the extension. What was your initial thought when it went down?
Well, I was completely caught off guard. I think, like everybody else, it was a surprising move. It's a great decision to extend Andy Reid. I think if you look at the success of the team over the last 4 years and what he's been able to accomplish, it's a smart thing to do, and it's the right thing to do for the organization and for Andy Reid. From the John Dorsey standpoint, I think that was the thing that surprised everybody, because if you look at the success the team has had over the last 4 years, the continuity there seemed to be between Andy and John, I think it caught a lot of people off guard, and especially from John's position. When you look at the way the roster has changed, his first couple years, there was continual change all the time in the roster, and trying to get the depth there, trying to get the competition up at training camp, and that's what John brought to it. So this is a little bit of a head scratcher. I don't know if many people know the reason why, but I'm sure at some point in time it'll come out.
Well, and that's the thing. They're in the situation now where they got to try to figure out what was the situation behind it. Not, you see reports that it was Clark Hunt's decision alone, and then you see reports that Andy was trying to push this, and then you start going back to like the handling of Jeremy Maclin or the handling of Patrick Mahomes. Anytime you trade up that big, there might have been conflicting reports. When you're looking at it, though, I mean, at some point, the other guy in the room had to have some idea that, that at least the conversations are taking place, right? Or Reid or Dorsey, don't you feel like that somebody was, like, do you really think, or do you think that Hunt could make this decision on his own without at least trying to figure out where other people stand on it?
Well, first off, as an owner, you definitely can make whatever decision.
Yes.
You can make whatever decision you want, and you don't have to discuss it with anybody. You can make whatever decision you want. So whether or not he discussed that with people, I don't know. Maybe he had individual discussions with John Dorsey that we're not privy to, that we don't know, that John hasn't shared. That maybe it was John didn't want to sign an extension. Maybe that's where.
Well, in the Green Bay conversations with Ted Thompson come up,
and that always came into play. So maybe John was, I want to play this contract out, and Clark was like, well, that's not we don't want to work that way, and so maybe that's where it started. Or I guess what we're all kind of reading from the statement is Clark made the decision not to extend it, and so they decided to amicably end it the way they did. So. There's different directions, scenarios that can play out, and unless Clark decides to share that with us, or John does, I don't know if we'll ever find out.
We know that Andy Reid had some say in John Dorsey, and got a little approval process through that.
Right.
He's saying, there were reports today that Andy Reid, according to guys in Kansas City and Sam Mellinger, saying that he's not going to do the GM role. They're going to bring somebody else in. You would presume that Andy Reid would help them make that decision for a guy who's going to be on the personnel side?
Well, you would think so. When you look at Andy's last few years in Philadelphia, he was the GM and coach. When he was signed here, he made very clear that he didn't want to have the dual role. He wanted to maintain being the coach. He didn't want to do both, and that's why he was all for bringing John Dorsey in. So I guess it'll remain to be seen. I don't know if at this point in time there's going to be that GM candidate that you bring in, or do you let John do both roles, or do you let Andy do both roles throughout this season and hire somebody at a later time? I don't know that. I don't know where the other contracts stand around the league and who you can bring in from a personnel standpoint.
Just last thing, and then I'll let you go, Trent. When you're looking at John Dorsey's job, I think you can frame it two ways. I think you can look at some of the things like it took a long time to get long contract extensions done, and they've cut third-round picks. But you can frame it the other way, which he helped take over a 2-14 team. They've been to the playoff 3 or 4 seasons. And your evaluation, do you feel like John Dorsey's done a pretty good job in Kansas City?
I think he's done more than a good job. I think he's done a great job. When you look at what he's done and what he and Andy have done over the 4 years they've been together, the roster turnover they've done, the contracts they've done as far as bringing in veteran guys, the trades that he's made, the young guys that he's brought in. He's taken some chance on some questionable guys like a Justin Houston and a Marcus Peters, a Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Those guys have all paid off up until this point. They've stayed out of trouble off the field. So I think you have to give him a very good job in terms of what he's done. So it's not going to take long for him to find another job in the National Football League.
Don't think so. Cody Tapp, Trent Green here at the 810 Zone. We're at the 810 All-Star event. Come out and see us here. We'll be here until 8 o'clock for Sports Radio 810. I'm Cody Tapp.